Anakin sat in the Jedi shuttle, chin resting against gloved, metal knuckles. Outside the temple's hangar, the afternoon sun shined through, accentuating the numerous towers of the Senate district off in the distance. One of them stuck out more than the rest, the tallest one and among the largest on the entire planet, 500 Republica. Calling it only a tower, however, was a disservice. It was more of a mountain made of durasteel and permacrete, reaching so high its spire at the pinnacle went above the clouds. The crown of this spire made it into the platform of a planetary-level plasma gun capable of shooting down vessels well into the upper atmosphere of Coruscant. The crown wasn't the only part of 500 Republica adorned with incredible technology. Over 50 skydocks and hundreds of turbolifts were either situated or ran through the entirety of the building. Thousands of rooms for housing, concerts, medical and security needs comprised its various accommodations. A small army of security staff capable of defending this place from any assault lived there perpetually. They were only rivaled in number by the equally numerous politicians, aides, celebrities and such, making it their primary residence. Throughout its entire 1,000-story length of square kilometers, there were entire planets, possibly even entire star systems, completely outclassed by what comprised the home of Coruscant's elite. The very same elite who were no doubt either shocked, bloody furious or some combination of both. Master Windu and Obi-Wan, along with a sizable force of clone troopers and Republic intelligence personnel, were currently securing the entirety of the building, making sure no one unwanted could come in or out. Skydocks were being shut down, armed soldiers surrounded as much of the place as they could. People were being put in lines, each person in those lines checked several times over before being split off into two groups, suspects and non-suspects. Everyone in the first group was to stay put and wait until their questioning was completed. Everyone else could go about their business so long as it didn't interfere with the investigation. The indignation, shock, and fear present in the building were no doubt palpable. Anakin voiced his own concerns about this, how this act reminded him of the various Security Act procedures. There were no raids obviously, nor was anyone being hauled off to prison without due process on the basis of being born into an enemy species, but it still left a sour taste in his mouth. But when asked for an alternative by Master Windu the night before, he couldn't offer one. Him or Obi-Wan. Short of spending months, possibly even years circumnavigating to find someone who'd proven themselves adept at hiding in plain sight, creating a choke point was the only way to entrap the Sith. And none of the council believed they had that much time left. If anything, everything would reach its conclusion within weeks. Possibly even just days. Even if all of them collectively knew for a fact the Supreme Chancellor was beyond any suspicion, an absolutely trustworthy ally, it wouldn't actually change much. Where, how and through whom the Sith Lord controlled the Republic would remain the core issue. The ways of corruption were as numerous as the number of representatives within the Senate, and one as deftly capable of navigating through them meant no one outside the Order could be trusted. Not the senators, not Republic intelligence, and not even the clones. It was, for this reason, a series of Jedi strike teams, unknown even to the army currently occupying 500 Republica, were situated near the towering building. Their purpose was twofold: provide support for the Jedi inside should Sidious be discovered and backup was required, and to help the Jedi inside escape if the enemy turned their trap for him against them. Two more strike teams had already been sent out under the rotunda to discover if any tunnels connecting 500 Republica and the senatorial bunkers existed. Other notable knights and masters were performing such failsafes throughout the temple as well. Younglings were already being sent away through secret passageways built underneath the temple, into shuttles which would carry them via equally secret hyperspace lanes to parts unknown to almost anyone. Many of these same vessels already carried the great knowledge of the Jedi with them, far away from Coruscant. Jedi not back home, beyond tangible support or the ability to retreat from the battlefields themselves lest they provoke the enemy, were nonetheless afforded warnings to be wary of absolutely anyone not in the Order. Even their own troops. Such was the precarious situation the Jedi found themselves in. Any number of things could go impossibly wrong for them at any given moment. Any number of individuals or organizations friendly to them could become a terrible enemy. It was the knife's edge the Order had to walk now. Partly from the machinations of the Sith but also their own faults. It was a situation Anakin still found unbelievable to a certain extent. But that was born out of a remaining childish notion of preserving the status quo, such as it was. Weeks ago, He would have thought the Order losing grip on reality, chasing ghosts or running away from them. But he had too many doubts of his own, suspicions of blades waiting in the dark to strike to think otherwise. His own part to play was as a lie detector and intermediary between Masters Obi-Wan, Windu and the strike team's overall leader, Master Sasitine. Anakin would land at the only skydock left open and sit down in a small room just underneath the one the questioning was to take place. From there, he would sit in a meditative position and observe through the currents of the Force for duplicity and deceit from the myriad of people to be questioned in the coming days. Then, every so often through the Force, he would contact Master Teen through brief telepathic flashes. 1 to indicate everything was fine, 2 if fighting was to break out. The Iktaki Jedi was one of the longest-serving members on the Council, a reserved individual whose tendency to keep to himself and appearance made him seem unapproachable. A trait that extended into him never taking on an apprentice. He was also fiercely loyal to the Jedi Order and a proven battle commander, one of the finest leading the Grand Army of the Republic. What made him an important player in recent events was his known telepathic abilities, a well-known trait among his species who were barred from most casinos. The skill to knowingly or unknowingly reach into another person's mind and perceive that which they may not wish to reveal. A perfect instructor to take up Master Yoda's place while they practiced precisely this within the room of 1,000 fountains throughout from dusk to midday the day. Though he seemed as stern as Master Windu, it was only a cover to mask an individual who Anakin couldn't help but like. He was bold, sending his entire army out of a falling Republic ship and stealing one from the Separatists. The next reason was his passion for flying and starfighters. Oh, many Jedi could fly better than most regular pilots, but he'd rarely encountered one for a true passion for the skill of flying. Its tricks, maneuvers, the inner workings of the machines. In this regard, Master Teen was the complete antithesis of Obi-Wan. Their short conversations on the subject even managed to bring out the reserved Iktaki's sense of humor. Anakin had always been somewhat nervous around him, more so than several other council members, and felt sorry now for misjudging the man. If there was something he could unquestionably be grateful for in this labyrinth of evil, as Masters Yoda and Windu called it, it was the securing of his family's safety. He'd asked Obi-Wan and Master Windu if they could put Padme and the twins under Jedi protection, just in case his premonitions were unavoidable. He needn't have bothered. Master Yoda already picked and recalled 2 Jedi who were perfect for the task. When Anakin heard their names and recalled their accomplishments, he wholeheartedly agreed with the assessment. Not just anyone could fool Dooku and his dark acolytes. Still, when he called Padme that evening, informing her that he would be staying at the temple, Anakin felt guilty for withholding so much information from her, particularly when so much of it pertained to her friends in the Senate. After opening himself up to his fellow Jedi, going back to secrecy with her of all people was another bitter pill to swallow. Eventually, thankfully, the Carmelink beeped affirmatively. It was time to get things underway. The shuttle ride was brief, getting him to the allotted skydock in less than 30 minutes. As expected, the guards stationed there were briefly told to leave, and if the cameras were shut off as per other orders, Anakin would get inside with no one seeing him. The mountain that was 500 Republica towered over him, enhanced by the effect of a heavy wind beating against his body on the way to the door. Once inside, he was greeted by an empty hallway with dozens of doors. He took the one to his immediate right and, following a special code provided for him, locked it shut. It was a small waiting room, decorated in such a way to provide whoever stepped of a possibly long flight the chance to relax for a bit while waiting to see someone or travel to their proper accommodations. Anakin pushed aside the Durasteel table and expensive chairs, placing them into the corners of the room. He sat down in a meditative position, dominant hand gripping his lightsaber just in case, and closed his eyes. Then, when he reached out through the Force to the floor immediately above him, Anakin fought the urge to immediately snap them open from pure shock. "Is there anything amiss, Master Kenobi?" "Beyond my surprise at seeing you, Supreme Chancellor?" He smiled at the older man sitting across the table from him. "Nothing at all." Even decades of Jedi training could not wholly hide the shock Obi-Wan felt when Palpatine walked through the door. Regal but friendly looking, flanked by 2 of his Red Guard left outside. In the hours since arriving there, his seemingly unshakable demeanor withstood dozens of blows from all sides. Firstly, from himself. Much like Anakin, this kind of approach did not sit well with him, invading 500 Republica and corralling people into one group or another as though they were cattle. The commotion, for he used that word quite loosely, that followed from this was contained but readily apparent. Anyone with any developed social skills or empathy, never mind force-based perceptions, could read the room. Dismay, paralyzing fear and so much more prevailed across every room he and Mace walked across. It inevitably led to hate, as fear and anger always do. Obi-Wan thought his years of fighting on worlds which were outwardly hostile to the Jedi and the Republic would prepare him. But to see it here, on Coruscant, in his own home? It was troubling. Even Mace could not wholly contain it. Once or twice, there was a momentary but unmistakable flash of regret in his eyes. Particularly when senators with good relations to the Jedi were quick to call them out. The most common accusation flung at them was, "Why are you wasting time with this? Why are you not hunting down Grievous?" Obi-Wan tried his best to calm these tensions, to explain in somewhat certain terms that this was necessary, an important step in ending the war. Some were cooled by his words, most were not. If anything, it only added incredulity and further hostility to the entire proceedings. Public support for the Order, save for Anakin, was already battered and bruised. This would do little to help it, particularly if Sidious squirms his way out of it and they're left with absolutely nothing at all. Now, this happened, the arrival of Chancellor Palpatine, not there to possibly help calm his fellow politicians and social elite members down but to apparently answer their questions. It was so sudden neither he nor Mace had the opportunity to even warn Anakin. To his credit, Obi-Wan's former student did not give himself away through the Force, even if he was most assuredly more shocked than his superiors. "I must apologize for that, some urgent matters required my attention and well." He smiled dryly, almost conspiratorially. "Quite a few of my aides and direct colleagues are indisposed at the moment." "I'm sure they have nothing to worry about, sir," Obi-Wan kept smiling. Mace simply nodded, not betraying any hints of surprise. "It is the outcome I desire." Palpatine's smile imperceptibly faded, his voice laced with worry. But it passed as quickly as it came, his strength restored. "This is why I have come here, to discover the identity of this Darth Sidious. You will need a full account of what transpired on the day of Grievous' heinous attack upon our capital world." "We are all ears, Chancellor," Mace said as diplomatically as he could, gesturing for him to speak at his own pace. "Truth be told, the day began in a way most would find unwelcome but I've grown quite used to. I did not sleep at all that night." "It is," he said with reluctance and more than a hint of embarrassment, "a condition I've suffered for a number of years now." "A medical one?" Obi-Wan inquired. "Nothing quite so simple. This is exclusively a matter of the mind and one entirely of my own making. I would like to call it a consequence of my position and the growing responsibilities for a whole galaxy but I fear it is of a more sinister origin." "Sinister in what way?" Mace asked, eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Politics was not always of interest to me, as impossible as it may seem," he laughed. Obi-Wan smiled along with it while Mace merely raised an eyebrow. "It was spurned by a chance encounter with a Moon known as Odat Pa, a businessman as quite a few Moon are. He was a guest of my father at the time and I was to entertain him with all the reluctance of impetuous, willful youth. However, even then I was not so foolish as to ignore his advice and from this single encounter my aspirations for politics, for better or worse, began there. I remained in close contact with Odat for many, many years. Even after he'd secluded himself away for fear of his own life. His mood darkened then, lips slightly curling. Men came to kill him, many times but each one Odat survived. Until the final attempt claimed his life. He was murdered in his sleep by someone he thought he could trust. I began to wonder, in this galaxy where strife seemed to stir, would I befall the same fate? After all, I am the Supreme Chancellor after all." "You never mentioned this to anyone in the Order," Mace said matter-of-factly. "Nor to even those within my inner circle. I suppose it would defeat the point of constant alertness if anyone knew I was enforcing it upon myself. And..." Palpatine took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging. He appeared more vulnerable than Obi-Wan had ever seen him. "I was worried others would begin to question me, to wonder if I was unsuited to my position." "Not without good reason," Mace said, unaffected by the display. "A leader who cannot rest properly can make for a poor one." "Quite so, though," Palpatine smiled self-deprecatingly. "Though I would like to think I've done as well as I can, given the various circumstances." These are trying times for all of us. Obi-Wan spoke empathetically, though not only for that reason. The conversation had veered far off course. And to end them, I believe we must continue the purpose for our being here. Of course, Palpatine nodded along, clearing his throat. After spending the sleepless night wondering about a great many matters, all of which concerned the war in some form or another, I left my suite for a change of scenery. I arrived at 500 Republica some 20 minutes later. Pestage was in a mood from my abrupt departure, but I did not pay much heed to it. It would not be the first or last time my schedule was altered from my own necessities or someone else. After that, I showered, changed my clothes while reorganizing my schedule when Director Rizard personally barged into my room to tell me. A knocking sound was heard from the other side of the doors, with Director Rizard himself entering a moment later. At nearly 2 feet tall, Armand Izzard would have stood out among any company. The white stripe of hair running through his otherwise black curls ensured so. From Ace's own encounters with the man, he was a cold man, devoted to his position but also quite prickly. An estimation Obi-Wan found accurate when his blue, piercing gaze laid eyes upon him during their first meeting mere hours ago. Now, however, there was something else behind the seemingly usual demeanor of his. An almost incontrollable excitement? Supreme Chancellor, Masters Kenobi, and Windu, he addressed them all, though his eyes were trained only at Palpatine. "You were told not to disturb us," Mace said, and Izzard looked at him only then, a biting remark no doubt playing at the edge of his nearly unmoving jaw. "I am quite certain Director Izzard would not do so if it was not of great importance," Obi-Wan interjected mildly, curious to see what was happening. "You are right, Master Kenobi," Izzard said with begrudging professionalism. "More right than you realize. I've just received word from one of our agents far in the Outer Rim and have acquired the visual proof to verify its authenticity from his probe droid." Izzard smiled then, his blue eyes and white teeth giving him the appearance of a predator. "We've found the entire Separatist leadership on Utapau." It must have been the 5th time Anakin and most of the other council members had seen the footage play out, and likely the 10th for Obi-Wan and Master Windu, who sat next to him. Izzard's footage did not lie, showcasing the seemingly uninhabitable world of Utapau in all its desolate glory from the point of view of an observation droid. The device flew throughout the mountainous hole, acting as the city for the native populace, making its silent way through a series of vast, interconnected black and grey pumps. Until it caught sight of them, the Separatist leadership. Not just the likes of Newt Gunray or Poggle the Lesser. Not simply General Grievous but also Count Dooku. The assembled group conversed about something the droid could not pick up. Even its visual feed was stretched to the limit thanks to the maximized zoom option of its sole, optical eye. But there was no doubt about it, they were all there and the footage was just an hour old. Chancellor Palpatine's unexpected but willing questioning was brought to an end with this. Master Windu and Obi-Wan both had to leave, to consult with his fellow Jedi. They connected to the holoprojector to the Council 1, summoned an immediate meeting of all available members and observed the footage time and time again. Masters Mundi and Kuhn were absent this time. The demands of fighting made it impossible for them to be present. They were replaced by Masters Teen, Fisto, and Shark T. Anakin could not sense what any of them felt. He didn't want to let Sidious potentially learn of his perceptions, but he could try assuming from his own thoughts and feelings. It was a golden opportunity, a chance to take down the entire Separatist leadership and finish this bloody war by day's end. It was the kind of victory you could only ever dream about, and that was what made it too good to be true. "He's making fools of us," Master Kalar said gravely. "Have to agree with Arjian here," Master Fisto said, trying to sound his usual easygoing self. "This information drops on us just when we've set up this whole investigation? Right in the middle of Palpatine's questioning? And yet the footage is authentic," Master Windu reminded them. "I questioned Izzard of its authenticity enough times to irritate myself. There is no doubt about it." "There's no doubt about Izzard's honesty either," Anakin, reluctantly, spoke up. "He was as transparent about it as can be." "Transparent in his own belief?" "Yes," Master Teen said, getting looks of surprise from most of his fellow council members. "Yet, what Izzard believes may not be the truth. We should have our own people to validate the authenticity of the footage." Palpatine suggested the same, Obi-Wan said. "He believes in Izzard and wishes for the swift end to the Clone Wars once and for all." "Just suggested," Master Kalar repeated, a dark look on his face. Not commanded, not yet. We are caught, Master T said with a sigh. We are caught so thoroughly we have no choice but to fight. Thanks to his new powers, Palpatine can tell us to attack anyone he wants us to. If we try to resist him, Sith or no Sith, he will have grounds to act against us for it. And our reputation with the Senate just took a blow, Obi-Wan said, shaking his head. We've earned no friends today, more than likely we've lost quite a few. We're about to lose more, Master Fisto sighed in an unusually downtrodden voice. We're talking about fighting Dooku and Grievous here, together. It'll take the combined power of more Jedi, and even then, it won't be a guaranteed victory. 2, Master Windu said matter-of-factly. Just 2, but they are 2 I would rather not send away. Anakin and Obi-Wan exchanged glances, and for the first time, the former found the idea of going out to fight distinctly unpleasing. The rest of the council looked at the two of them, and they were all united in this sentiment as well. Yet, Master Windu sighed, revealing his palms to the others. I don't know who else to send. I can't leave here. The investigation, such as it is, must continue, and the enemy will find out if Master Yoda is diverted there. Not to speak ill of you, my fellow Jedi, but I don't think anyone else here can defeat a pair like Dooku and Grievous. Masters Kalar and Teen said nothing. Master Fisto nodded along with the assessment while Master T leaned back in her seat, looking distinctly ashamed. Anakin felt a pang of sympathy for her, suffering 2 terrible losses at the hands of a creature like Grievous. There was a reason he was infamous for his ability to instill fear in the Jedi. It was a look he'd seen on Master Mundi's face as well when Anakin asked him about the fight on Hyperi years ago. Perhaps, Obi-Wan said, slowly and mildly, exchanging looks with everyone present. Anakin knew just from his tone of voice he'd figured something out. We can turn this situation to our advantage. All of the Separatist leadership is there, we know this. Assuming nothing changes in the time it takes us to arrive at Utapau, we may be able to capture at least one of them. Most preferably, Newt Gunray, Anakin concluded with a smile. You want someone to capture Gunray, get him out of there and use him to find out who Sidious is. Precisely, Obi-Wan returned it. We will, of course, strive to bring them all in. However, Gunray is the one we know for certain has spoken with Darth Sidious. From him, we may be able to circumnavigate around the investigation altogether. Sidious will expect this, Master Kalar pointed out. I find it unlikely he won't have contingencies in place. At the very least they'll be very well guarded, Master Fisto said. And if the clones are in the Sith's pocket, that won't present a problem, Master Windu interrupted with a certain satisfaction in his voice. When Anakin looked at him, he stared at the grim smile across his face. Not for the Force I have in mind. For they are unlike any other in the Grand Army of the Republic and absolutely loyal to their Jedi General. It was amazing what a difference only 48 hours could do when you're going someplace, or more accurately returning to it. On his initial return to Coruscant, seeing Padme's though technically their apartment was a refreshing change of pace from the endless trenches, battlefields, and Venator-class interiors. It was an oasis, for lack of a better word. From politics, war, Jedi, Sith and all the rest of the galaxy both of them had to deal with regularly. It was a place where they could, briefly, just be married like ordinary people. But it was also a bittersweet place for them, where they frequently told one another goodbye, possibly for the last time every time. It made every departure just as hard if not harder than the last. A similar but far more potent apprehension about leaving hung over Anakin's thoughts like a storm cloud. Except 100 times worse. Before, there was an understanding that Coruscant was safe, even if everything else went to hell out there, this place would hold strong. It couldn't be further from the truth, and now he had to leave all over again. Even Anakin's breathing exercise was being put to the limit as he rode the frankly claustrophobic, secret turbo lift up hundreds of stories to the top. It didn't get any easier even when he could breathe normally once it stopped and the wall hiding it slid open. Anakin saw the central hallway stretch out before him, dimmed lights adorning its sides to fit the evening mood. Stepping outside, he spotted 2 sets of staircases leading up to the veranda. He could faintly hear the fountain water at the center of it bubbling away. However, it was what he couldn't see yet that brought a soothing feeling to wash over him, dispelling the events of the day into nothingness. He stood there, smiling, eyes closed and perceptions focused on the three living beings just a short walk away on the veranda. Their signature in the Force remained impossibly pure and bright, even drowning out the brief flashes of worry coming off of Padme like a beacon. Anakin dearly wished he could take a piece of this sensation with him, carry it out into upcoming battles. Even Obi-Wan's soothing presence couldn't compare. Guess I'll just have to enjoy it while it lasts, Anakin thought as he refocused his attention to everything else within the apartment. The fleeting sensations left in the Force from visitors, security personnel and others moving to and from the place through the past day or so. It was what or rather who he couldn't sense whatsoever that brought another smile to his face before finally ascending the staircase. Before even reaching its top, Anakin was already greeted by the lights of Coruscant's Senate District illuminating the night sky. Millions if not billions of them coming from homes, business offices and numerous flying rows of vehicles provided a sight almost unparalleled on the entire planet as far as he was concerned, especially in the very early morning. Only the view from one of the Jedi Temple's spires beat it out. The effect was enhanced by the dim lights in the sitting room itself. The disc-shaped lamps were set to a low setting as was the illuminator. Padme sat or rather leaned against the left sofa, attention focused on the view outside while both hands gently stroked her stomach through the nightgown. Anakin gently walked over to her, slowing his pace to take in the third goddess of Naboo on the veranda before gently and noiselessly sitting next to her. She wasn't frightened or even surprised by his presence at all. Instead, she immediately leaned into his shoulder while his left arm went around her shoulders. Through the Force, he sensed both of their tensions ease from each other's company, and the twins, simple but very sensitive beings nonetheless, shined even brighter with their parents together again. It was a feeling the whole family enjoyed in pleasant silence. Of course, it couldn't last. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about what would happen at 500 Republica," Anakin spoke after a long while, running a hand over her belly. "I know we frightened a lot of your friends and colleagues with it." "I know you are," she answered, taking his gloved hand into hers. "You wouldn't keep this a secret from me unless it was extremely important." "It was," he sighed. "Maybe the most important thing that's happened on Coruscant so far." "But it didn't work out?" Anakin smiled ruefully. "No, nothing about it went like I expected or wanted. Not in the good way. I've been getting surprised lately either." She shifted position just enough to look up at him, and the concern was painfully apparent across her face. "Talk to me, what's going on? Ever since you went to meet with the council I've felt something wrong from you." He was very tempted to try and deflect it with a joke about her developing Jedi powers, but stopped himself. The circumstances were far too gone to fall back on old, bad habits. "I told the council everything, about us, the twins, and they're letting me stay in the Order." He decided to start with that. It would be easier for both of them to get the good news out of the way first. "I won't be getting invited to join the other masters there any time in the next few decades, but I'm still in Order itself, and they've agreed to help us with anything we need. For ourselves and the kids." She let out a relieved, silent sigh from the news, almost melting in his arms. He really, really wanted that to be the only thing to tell her, but the war, as always, wouldn't let them be. "But that's not all. After I talked to them about our situation, Master Windu took the floor. He told all of us, about a Sith Lord, right here on Coruscant, goes by the name of Darth Sidious." Anakin's lip curled, and his family's presence was just barely enough to unclench the sudden tightness in his chest. "They tracked him to 500 Republica." 500? Oh my. Padme gasped, eyes wandering about the veranda as she took in the full force of what that meant. Are they sure?" "Absolutely," Anakin gravely confirmed. "Obi-Wan and I managed to track down a special holoprojector when we raided Newt Gunray's estate on Cato Nemoidia a few weeks back. We didn't get much from it except his name and a specific location in the works. From there, Masters Windu and Shaak Ti followed a trail belonging to Dooku and Sidious both all the way to 500 Republica. And Grievous just so happened to attack before they could go further?" "Right, pretty convenient, huh? Do you know anything else?" She rose, sitting up to face him. "What species he belongs to? Is he a senator? Surely the Sith can't be in there too." "Palpatine," Anakin cut her off, deciding now was the time to get to the heart of the matter. "They think it's Palpatine." Her reaction wasn't what he expected either. There was shock there certainly, from her widening eyes and the sharp intake of breath. Never mind the sensations he felt through the Force. However, it was far too muted. As though Anakin had revealed something she'd felt or suspected for a while. The surprise lasted only a few moments and Padme calmed herself down with far greater ease than he did just days ago. A stupid, childish instinct to snap at her crossed his mind for a minute with equally stupid questions about what she knew already and for how long. Anakin ignored it almost as quickly as it came. Padme knew he was curious about her reaction, could tell it alone from the way she didn't quite meet his eyes for a good minute, steeling herself for something difficult of her own. A few senators and I. She started half-heartedly, then took a deep breath, transforming into the person who regularly stood her ground against the representatives of thousands of systems in a matter of seconds. We've been discussing what's been happening on Coruscant, in the Senate. How the security act has gotten out of control, the reports of abuse coming from across the whole planet being done to its non-human populace. And Palpatine too. I didn't really notice it until Bail said trying to get an audience with the Chancellor was like waiting for a high emperor of old, barbarian worlds to grace you with his time. It's a stupid little detail, I know. I even laughed at him for it the first time. But when it kept happening over and over again, and when I started noticing how the kind, approachable man I knew started changing in ways I didn't like, I knew something was wrong. In what ways, besides just the waiting? Anakin leaned forward, putting the husband aside in favor of the Jedi. What did he say or do? His warmongering for one, she said with a matter-of-fact bluntness he blinked at. Before, there were genuine efforts of some compromise or reasonable solutions to the war. When we asked for the consideration of peaceful negotiations, Palpatine seemed to listen. We even made several potential proposals with him after long hours of deliberation. But the longer war dragged on, and the stronger his position became. He listened to us less and less. Any proposal or plan, no matter how far along for a peaceful resolution we put forward, he rejected or half-heartedly said he'd consider. I was beginning to get the impression he was growing to dislike us more and more too, even if he kept calling us friends, and how everything would be all right when we finally won. One time, Fang Zha actually challenged him, calling the prolonging of war nothing but opportunistic bloodshed. Palpatine looked at him in a way I'd never seen before. It lasted just a second, but I swear I thought he was going to attack Zha for saying that, physically. Zha must have thought so too. He quieted down after mumbling an apology. Palpatine smiling right away like a switch flipped in his head didn't make me feel any easier about that. How long have you been having doubts about Palpatine? A few months, since before the last time you were on shore leave. Why didn't you tell me? She smiled at him then, but it was one of pity. Oh Anakin, really? Palpatine is like a kind uncle to you. He's been one of your best friends since you were a boy. You've told me a million times how great a man he is, how he'll definitely fix everything, and how everyone should follow his lead no matter. All right, he almost snapped again but fought the childish impulse back. His interruption thankfully came out far calmer. All right, I see your point. I admit it, I wouldn't have listened if you told me then. To you or anyone else. This, however, made Anakin pause. A simple question he didn't bother to ask himself ever since Master Windu's faithful accusation. Why was he so quick to doubt the man? Nothing had changed between him and the Chancellor before that to taint Anakin's view of the man. If anything, they'd grown closer than ever before. There were things Palpatine could know nobody else was allowed to, not even Padme. Secrets, thoughts, aspirations, and ambitions he would have rather died than to share with anyone except the Supreme Chancellor. And just as quickly as Anakin asked himself this question, he knew the answer, because the Masters had good reason to be suspicious. Anakin felt that for himself that day, in 500 Republica, listening in on the conversation through mundane and Force-related means. Absolutely nothing Palpatine said during his whole monologue about his past was untrue, not a word of it. However, it was the way he said it that made Anakin's well-honed instincts scream. Everything he said was detailed just enough to give whoever was listening to a good enough picture of what happened, but still worded in such a way there weren't any exactly precise details to look into, or to fumble lying about. Masters Yoda and Teen warned him about such a tactic, how one was able to lie far more effectively to others and to themselves by simply delivering partial truths and then using clever wordplay or other phrasing answers and explanations in deliberately vague enough sounding ways to mask true intent or meaning. Beyond even this point, however, Palpatine's advice to him from the past was wrong. Many Many times Anakin complained to him about the Jedi, how they were too rigid and incompatible with him, and upon replaying these conversations, Palpatine never disagreed with him outright. He would say this master on that was wise indeed, but there was always something else, something more Anakin could aspire to get. Something the Jedi couldn't give him, even if Palpatine never used those exact words. He was special, destined for greater things and so on. He didn't admit it to himself until that moment, but all those words seemed targeted specifically to cater to Anakin's ego, and to divorce him from the Jedi. Sometime during his considerations, Padme put her arms around him in a hug, one he immediately returned. He must have freaked out again without even realizing, judging by the way his chest was painfully clenched and a hard lump appeared in his throat. Stretching out with the Force to his immediate vicinity, Anakin relaxed and allowed his family to wash his fears and pains away again. Yes, he'd missed them terribly when he left in the morning, back out into the war to capture General Grievous and Dooku both. The thought would have excited him like nothing else before. Now? It just felt like a distraction, because the real fight would clearly be elsewhere. More than likely on Coruscant, and there was no way he would be there to make sure the right people won it. But he didn't tell that to Padme, not yet at least. He wanted to give them both just a bit more peace of mind before the messes of the galaxy interfered with it again. The landing pad was the organized hive of mass activity Anakin knew it would be. With R2 at his side, the pair made their way past scores of living and mechanically personnel preparing everything they'd need to take on Utapau. To their left, one could see the district-sized landing pad stretch out far into the early morning horizon of Coruscant, its lights shining against the towering behemoths of 6 Venator-class star destroyers, some already preparing to leave while others were about to. Obi-Wan's ship for the mission, the Vigilance, was in the latter group. Even hundreds of feet above the open ramps, Anakin could hear the rhythmic activity down below. The distinct whir of Republic hover tanks moving inside the assault cruisers. This was nothing next to the clones. With a picture-perfect image born from seeing them do it 1,000 times before, Anakin could imagine the ranks upon ranks of troopers following behind the attack vehicles, battalions of men bred for war, marching with the synchronicity surpassing that of their separatist counterparts. It was a fact he once found pleasing, a sort of visual representation of the orderly galaxy that should exist. Everyone knows their place and what they can and cannot do. Palpatine and others who could be trusted to lead wielded the power to do so, and everything was perfect. It had come to pass. The clones fought and answered directly and only to the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. Not the Senate or even their Jedi generals, Palpatine. Though he still didn't want to think ill of the man or the clone troopers he'd fought alongside for so many years, recent events made this increasingly impossible. The battle droid comparison left Anakin feeling even more on edge than he already was. Luckily, there were those they could trust, and one man in particular standing just about 20 feet away was worth entire battalions all on his own. Seeing Obi-Wan lightened his burden considerably, Master Windu being there brought it right back. R2 let out a curious beep. "We'll find out soon enough." Anakin let out another calming breath, recollecting the sensation of the twins through the Force with great clarity and calming himself back down. He bowed to the 2 senior Jedi. "Masters," Anakin greeted them with R2 beeping his hello at his side. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is proceeding as planned, Anakin," Master Windu bowed in return. "I'm just here to see you two off. And to escape 500 Republica for a while longer, I suspect." Obi-Wan smiled with a knowing look at Master Windu's direction. The usually stoic Kuran Jedi looked annoyed for a moment before slyly and briefly smiling in admission. "Your dislike of politicians must be rubbing off on me, Obi-Wan." Perhaps. Anakin's old teacher cast a glance at him. Though he smiled on, the ever-so-slight narrowing of his eyes betrayed Obi-Wan's own worries on the matter. "With any luck, we won't have to suffer it for much longer at all." "Nothing would make me happier, Master." The reasoning behind the sentiment was clear. This business with 500 Republica and Utapau was nothing but a distraction. One more in a long series of smokescreens and diversionary tactics made to toy with the Jedi, split them apart while the enemy's true goals and identity stayed safe. The real battle would be fought here, and soon. They all knew this, even though the clouded shroud of the Force. And it was a battle they'd have to fight with some of their best knights and masters away, while the rest would have to busy around with an investigation almost certain to yield nothing worthwhile. The fact Anakin's family would still be here when the explosive went off and he was away, only made things far more difficult. But he couldn't stay behind. The very thought of Obi-Wan taking on Grievous and Dooku with anyone else at his side sent a cold chill running through Anakin's whole body. He couldn't tell what it came from, the Force, his ordinary battle-honed instincts, some lingering part of his inflated ego, simple but impractical concern, or some combination of all three. However, the fact his family was protected by the Order made it far more tolerable of a choice to make. If it weren't for this added measure, Anakin knew he wouldn't be able to leave Coruscant, even for Obi-Wan's sake. Come clean to the Order had paid off again. A beeping from Obi-Wan's comlink broke Anakin's considerations. The Vigilance is ready to depart. Then so must I. Master Windu extended a hand to Obi-Wan. Take great care out there, my friends, win this war and return safely. I'll do my best to make sure you have something to come back to. We will, Mace, you can be certain of that. Master Windu accepted the promise with a slight bow and then extended a hand to Anakin as well. He took it after a moment's pause. We won't let you down, Master, Anakin promised, finding himself taken aback by the thought of going separate paths with the Kurun Jedi. May the Force be with you. And I will endeavor not to do the same. Master Windu smiled again and nodded at the two of them. And may the Force be with you, as well. With that, he turned and made his way into the crowd of people, his Jedi robes billowing in the wind before he vanished out of the sight. Soon after, even his presence in the Force drifted further and further away until the miasma of the dark side blotted it out. Anakin stared after him, once again feeling the compulsion to stay behind. But it was a slow battle. Before Obi-Wan's hand even touched his shoulder, Anakin turned around and walked first to the transport vessel waiting for them. His teacher and R2 following closely behind. Halfway there, Anakin muttered out, "Never thought I'd see the day when going to a fight would bother me this much. It is a credit to your wisdom when you recognize what battle is truly worth fighting at all." Anakin gave a half-hearted smile at the compliment, recognizing if one battle was worthier over another didn't mean much when the choice was all but taken out of your hands. He suspected Obi-Wan thought this too because his master didn't push the subject further than that. Instead, they entered the transport vehicle and flew towards the Vigilance in contemplative silence. The hangar bay of the Vigilance was a familiar sight. Turbo-laster guns with their respective crews capable of decimating enemy cruisers and even entire cities were loaded. Starfighters and transportation vehicles for ground forces and hover tanks received refueling and maintenance, and clone troopers oversaw or partook in all of it and much, much more. On the outside, all appeared normal or some approximation of normality in these trying times. Obi-Wan thought for the first time in many years when exactly he became indifferent to such military procedures. When did he accept the role of a soldier? He recalled the early weeks of the Clone Wars during which the thought "how is this happening?" became a near constant companion to him. But much like his former apprentice, the constant battles, duties and some might say excitements of war quickly left little room for such existential considerations. Even a prison camp where one had nothing but the time required spending it to plot escape routes. Now, with the veil slowly lifting these past few days on so many matters, the question returned with greater force than ever before. Potentially serving a Sith Lord or Sith stooge for almost 15 years would certainly do that. It was precisely for this reason why the sight of clone troopers with whom he'd fought alongside for so many years was suddenly only a familiar sight, but not a welcome one by any means. Though he was far better at not letting such thoughts and emotions slip out, Obi-Wan felt the same unease in this hangar as Anakin did. If all their suspicions about Palpatine were correct, he could order their arrest or deaths with a simple call right then and there. It was for this reason they traversed past or through the endless buzz of activity toward the exit where another familiar sight awaited them. General Kenobi, General Skywalker. Commander Cody greeted them both with handshakes, his voice a hint warmer and friendlier than the usual Clone One upon seeing them. Good to see you sirs in one piece. That invisible hand landing looked like a right mess. Officially known as CC 2224, Cody was the leader of the 7th Sky Corps and the 212th Attack Battalion, some of the units and divisions alongside the 501st making up their assault force for Utapau. Cody was awarded the title of Marshal Commander due to Obi-Wan's own acknowledgement of his abilities. Beyond simply obeying orders, he showed a remarkable level of self-initiative and independent thought as well as a cunning side for battlefield tactics. All of these qualities were why Cody became part of the then experimental ARC Trooper program by Alpha, created to encourage more self-identity from the most skilled of troopers. It was there he'd earned his proper name, one he gave to himself. Yet despite being glad to see him, Obi-Wan could not stop a voice in the back of his head from wondering which side Cody would fall on, should the worst with Palpatine come to pass, the obedient soldier or the good friend. Nor could he prevent himself from wondering if this familiarity with Clone was part of the Sith's already elaborate Jedi trap. "Well, you know us, Cody," Anakin smiled, managing to sound quite convincingly relaxed. Almost convincing enough for Obi-Wan to cast a surprised look his way that would certainly not do. Like to play it close to the chest. "Speak for yourself," Obi-Wan followed the banter up easily enough. "I'm quite done with flight-related theatrics for 10 lifetimes. I'm sure you won't have to ram a Star Destroyer into Utapau, General." "Depends, are those sinkholes on the planet big enough to fit one?" "Please stop giving Anakin any more ideas." "By your orders, General." The trip through the destroyer all the way up its commander tower passed in a mostly pleasant silence. Obi-Wan wasn't sure if it came from falling back into a routine or simply being away from the hangar bay. Unlike many Republic vessels from the past, the destroyers were constructed with a dual-bridge design with the port tower coordinating starfighter activity, whereas the starboard tower served as the regular command bridge. On every command bridge, however, there was a strategy room with a holoprojector map capable of giving incredibly detailed approximations of vessels, weapons, maps and everything else one would need to wage war. The initial briefing passed more of procedure than a necessity, a short chronicle of Utapau's past, its status in the war thus far, its geography and the outlying worlds making up the rest of the system. Most of the briefing elicited no feelings of note, save for the talk of neutrality. Of all the numerous systems to fall prey to the Clone Wars, the ones who had nothing to do with it brought forth the most pity from Obi-Wan. They swore no allegiances or wanted hostility towards anyone, simply to be left alone. More often than not, these were worlds too primitive to even be part of the wider galactic society, incapable of even defending themselves against a single battalion at the disposal of the Republic or Confederacy. Thankfully, from the Republic intelligence reports, Grievous and Dooku had shown a remarkable level of self-restraint. No battle took place for Utapau during the initial incursion. Their representatives merely accepted Confederacy control in exchange for no death or destruction. A promise kept so far. The thought of himself and Anakin being the ones to break this peace and bring the true chaos of war onto this world was a loathsome one. Even Anakin's recently improved self-control momentarily faltered when the thought elicited a flash of anger and disgust. "What do we know about their defenses?" Anakin asked, calming himself and letting the troubling ideas vanish into the Force. "After the beating on Coruscant and fighting out on other fronts, they can't be too formidable. From Reese intel, we know their ground forces consist of tens of thousands of battle droids occupying various levels of the sinkhole cities. B-1S, B-2S, UD-38s. Standard separatist forces. Not accounting for General Grievous, Count Dooku and the former's specialized IG-100s. And their navy? Besides the dreadnought, Grievous is using near the bottom of the sinkhole city as a base of operation. It seems they have no spacecraft of note." "That's not suspicious at all," Obi-Wan commented, running a hand across his beard and peering at the map of the Utapau system floating mere feet away. 7 worlds, each with a multitude of moons. Even removing the planets incapable of hiding a separatist vessel, that still creates a multitude of hiding spots from which to strike our flanks or back. The unspoken observation he made also had to do with the separatist leadership. Who was to say they were still down on Utapau? What if they were in fact on one of these vessels positioned in strategic hiding spots, merely waiting for the battle to begin, for the Republic's attention to focus elsewhere where they escaped? Such a vessel would no doubt be small, possibly even unguarded outside to avoid as much attention as possible. One also quickly enough to vanish to whatever location suited their purposes. "My thoughts exactly, sir, which is why I recommend we send out a series of very small, harder-to-detect scout ships into the system beforehand. That should let us get a better idea of what the enemy intends." "That won't be necessary, Commander," Anakin said, peering into the map. "Obi-Wan and I can handle it." "We can?" Obi-Wan raised an eyebrow. "Yes, Grievous wants Jedi more than anything else and the two of us will make for quite a prize." Assuming our piloting skills let us down, which they won't, Grievous will be too distracted by wanting to hack us down to notify the rest of his fleet about a Republic presence. With our scout run done beforehand, you'll have a clear enough picture of what'll happen and a distracted enemy force to get an edge on. Well played, Obi-Wan thought, masking his smile. His former apprentice sounded appropriately cunning and audacious to Cody, but with enough reasonable points to make the suicidal plan seem merely high risk instead of absolute madness. It was what he didn't say which mattered more. This plan of temporarily leaving the Third System's army behind would allow them to contact the other strike force elsewhere. It would be tricky, timing their assault with the Third System's army and also their impending duel with Grievous and Dooku. But if they succeeded, the enemy could be defeated and Separatist leaders would be in Jedi hands. Then they could begin to question Gunray and the rest on the precise identity of this Darth Sidious. Obi-Wan merely showed his approval through the Force, however. On the outside, he cast a long, suffering look Anakin's way. One of these days, you really will be the death of me. The Klegacorp mining facility was the crown jewel of its self-named corporation. Constructed in the utmost secrecy 3 years prior, it was built using the latest technologies and techniques at the disposal of the Techno-Union. Building anything on a world embodying the word hostile such as Mustafar deserved recognition, yet the Klegacorp mining facility went above and beyond what many considered possible. Constructed inside the very heart of a piercing, black mountain, the facility was equipped with the latest of amenities, defense systems, and cloaking devices. 1,000 individuals could live there for decades under active siege while the durasteel and energy shielding prevented any damage from invaders or the surrounding lava river. It was also equipped with a particularly potent communication tower directly linked into the central control system of the entire Separatist army, allowing one to wage the entire Clone Wars from absolute safety. Unless one knew the proper codes to circumnavigate past these defenses. A fitting fortress for fleeing vermin such as the Separatist Council. Or such was its original intention, in any case. Unfortunately for Gunray and the rest of his kind, they would never step foot inside. Their relevance, of what little it amounted to, had already expired the moment Master Sidious decreed they would remain within the Utapau system, at the mercy of Grievous or the Republic. Instead, the fortress had served thus far as Count Dooku's latest place of residence, and what a sight it was to behold. The world of Mustafar was once a fertile one, even serving as the home of a faraway Jedi enclave. Yet thousands of years before, during the time of Exarchun's fall, the world became subject to a fierce battle of Jedi and Sith, morphing the green, peaceful hillsides into blackened pillars jutting out of scorching lava beds. It was a world in constant pain, a world ripe with the dark side of the Force. Dooku couldn't get enough of it. As he spun the red blade this way and that in the darkened room, Dooku felt the potency of it intimately. For days upon days without end, he meditated or practiced his Makoshi in the depths of the mining facility whose countless defenses could never hope to deny the sheer brunt of the dark side permeating throughout Mustafar. With an absolute mastery of his craft, Dooku devoured every conceivable shred of energy he could reach out and take for his own. The raw power was at first overwhelming, nearly causing him to collapse. Yet upon steadying himself, he mastered the intake and now bathed in it constantly. The sensation set his body in an invigorating flame, burning away decades of wear. He felt 30 again, no, 20. A young man hungry to challenge the galaxy itself to a battle and triumphantly defeat it. Now, if only there was someone to test this power out on. 2 people in particular who of late never failed to raise his ire and propel the influx of dark side energies to greater heights still. A foolish notion passed through his mind, to disobey Sidious and take the battle to the Jedi. To make them pay for their humiliations inflicted upon account of Sereno. But Dooku was no mad novice. For all the strength he felt now, Master Sidious was above even that, far far beyond an Force user in history. Even Yoda and Skywalker combined. He would not jeopardize his position in the new order of the galaxy. Not without the blessing of his superior. Hours passed until Dooku's immersion in the Force was halted by the beeping of the communication projector in the heart of the strategy room. Deactivating his lightsaber and the youthful vigor coursing through him, Dooku activated the device and bowed to his knees as Master Sidious' image burst to life. "Greetings, my master. What is thy bidding?" "Lord Tyrannus," Sidious' voice drawled out as though a cave-like reverb carried it across the galaxy itself into the room. Mustafar has done well for you, my apprentice. Even an entire galaxy away, I can sense the rise in your strength. Yes, Master. The forces at play here are intoxicating, I admit. But I have not allowed them to master me. As I knew they would not, he added, smile present in his voice. Rejoice, my friend, for the fruition of our plans is nigh. Before the sun rises upon Coruscant tomorrow, our revenge shall be complete. The Jedi have taken the bait? Indeed, they've sent Skywalker and Kenobi both to apprehend you and Grievous. I expect they shall engage the Separatist forces in a matter of hours. Dooku could not help the rise in his temper at their mention, fingers curling ever so lightly. Even with your absence, the deaths of Grievous and the Separatist Council will force the Jedi here to act against me. Their suspicions born from Gunray's foolishness are plain to me. Will this present an issue? None whatsoever. A grim satisfaction became present in Sidious's voice. I know the Jedi well. Once it appears as though the Separatist threat is concluded, they shall move against Palpatine and merely seal their own fates. Which is precisely what I require you for, Lord Tyrannus. You wish me to come to Coruscant? Dooku fought back the excitement at the idea of exerting his new abilities against the likes of Shaak Ti, Fisto or even Mace Windu. Daring to raise his head, the form of Sidious with the face of Palpatine smiled just enough to show teeth from above him. In a manner of speaking, yes,